carry. It's the musicians that minister to the ministers. It always has been in my life, and it always will be, whether it's at Unity Village or wherever else I've been. The musicians minister to me. Music is so important. Today, we're talking about strength, and I want to mention, first of all, strength. Tell you a little story about two construction workers on the job, and the younger one was very proud of his muscles, and he bragged frequently about how strong he was, and he was a big, strong construction worker. And the older guy, with a whole lot more wisdom and a whole lot more experience, said to him, got a little tired of him bragging, and said to him, I bet you I can put something in this wheelbarrow and wheel it over to that building, and you can't wheel it back. Now that was too much for the young person, and so he decided he'd take him up on that, and he said, I'll take you up on that bet. You can't put anything in this wheelbarrow and wheel it over there that I can't wheel back. And the older man said, okay, you got the bet. He held up the wheelbarrow and he said, okay, get in. That's not the kind of strength we're talking about today, although it's a part of it. But there are definitions about strength that go a little bit farther than that. Now, strength also refers to stability and steadfastness. And probably steadfastness is the strongest thing I'm talking about today. But the power of strength in the 12 powers is represented by Andrew. And Andrew, the color is spring green, which is appropriate for this time of year. And Andrew was a big, strong guy, and he was Peter's brother in the Bible. And I don't know if those of you in the back can see all of this. I'm going to lift this up a little bit if I can, because you can see I suggested to Sue that she wear this in the 5K. It's going to have four more powers on the bottom of it, but we're talking about strength today, represented by Andrew, and the body center that represents this particular power is the low back, or the loins, as they're sometimes called. Strength. Now, Charles Fillmore defines strength as the energy of God, freedom from weakness, stability of character, power to withstand temptation. That takes a lot of strength sometimes. Capacity to accomplish, and steadfastness. I put that in all caps because that's probably the strongest definition I'm talking about today. It's a synonym in metaphysics because strength is mental, physical, and spiritual. And it's the strongest definition that I'm talking about today. Emily Cady, in Lessons in Truth. Now, I can only hope that I got these pages back in the same order that they were in this morning. So bear with me, and I'm not used to doing this and that, and I didn't get it done all that correctly. So we'll just float through this and see where we go. But Emily Cady, see, that's not where I need to be. That's not either. Anyway, Emily Cady, in Lessons in Truth, page 58, says that when you use strength, you need to use affirmations and denials. And I'm going to talk a lot about those today, especially affirmations. One major affirmation. Denials have an erasive effect, she says. Affirmations build up, give strength and courage and power. Denials, also, Myrtle Fillmore says, need to be used as brushing away cobwebs. Anybody been into an outbuilding or something that has a lot of cobwebs? If you swat them, what happens? They multiply, don't they? They split apart, and there are at least twice as many. So she says using denials should be done like brushing away cobwebs. You gently gather them together, and then get rid of them. Okay? Whereas affirmations build up strength, courage, and power. So people who live in the past need to deny, usually a great deal, to cleanse the mind of the past and not allow the past to affect their present or their future. Because most of the time it shouldn't. Affirmation should be used a great deal by those who are subject to anxiety and doubt, and also people in positions of responsibility need to use a lot of affirmations. But affirmations are to be done gently. Deny any undesirable condition and affirm the good you desire. Deny weakness and affirm strength. That's one of the ways. Deny evil, lack, or limitation of any kind and affirm the good. And those are the ways to use denial and affirmation. Mysteries of Genesis by Charles Fillmore says, until a man realizes that his strength is spiritual, it cannot become unbiting, unfailing, or enduring. You have to realize the spiritual. Now let me mention these 12 powers again, 8 of which are on this cloak at this time. We're not attempting in this 12-power series to find those, to seek them, to catch them, to kind of bring them into us. They're already in us. They're already in us. All of each of the 12 powers that we would ever need for anything are already in us. We have them. We don't need to seek after them. We simply call them forth, uncover them from all the stuff that we know that isn't so. And we know a lot of stuff that's not so in our life. A lot of stuff. Because as we grow up, usually we catch thoughts and ideas. Sort of like you would catch a cold. We just catch them. And we accumulate them, and pretty soon we're living from all of that, which is a reality that we've created, or that other people have helped us create. At any rate, we've accepted it. And so often, we have to check ourselves. We have to check if we are on the right track. And sometimes we're not. And I haven't been a few times in my life. Maybe you're in the same situation. Atom Smashing Power of Mind, page 50, by Charles Fillmore, and I don't know whether this is going to be... There we go. That's where I am. Fillmore emphasizes that everything has its origin in the invisible. In the invisible. We only have a slight conception of the strength of the intangible because we live in the tangible. We live reacting to what we see and hear outside of us. And that's where we often build our reality. And if that's not working for us, then use the tools of metaphysics to change that. And we can do that at any time. Are there any new truth students here that haven't done a whole lot with Unity Practical Christianity Principles? You're the most fun. I'm going to talk about my early experiences. But in the invisible, the idea becomes real and takes on spiritual reality. And then if we need to do any denial and to remove resistance and affirmation, then we hold fast to that with our might, with our strength, with our belief system, with our faith, with everything we have in us until it forms in the physical. That is the way we have created our lives. Whether we realize it or not, whether we accept it or not, whether we want to accept it or not, that is the way we have created our lives. Period. End of story. If we don't like it, we change it. If we don't like it, we change it. We can recreate our lives and recreate ourselves at any time. We must become a co-creator with God. The biggest career you will ever have is being a co-creator with God. And the best pay you will ever receive is being a co-creator with God. The benefits are incredible. Absolutely incredible. Now let me talk a little bit about a legend. The wind and the sun were in argument one day. They were disputing which was the stronger. Suddenly they saw a traveler coming down the road, the wind and the sun. And so the sun said, I see a way when we can decide our dispute. Whichever of us can cause that traveler to take off his cloak will be the winner, the stronger. And so the sun said, you go first. So the wind blew and it blew and it blew and it blew and it blew. And the harder it blew, the tighter the man pulled his cloak around him. And so finally, he just gave up. And it was the sun's turn. So the sun just simply shone. He just simply was in all his glory. And in a relatively short time, the man took off his cloak because he was warm in the sun. We have that going for us, whether we realize it or not. We have all we ever need within us right now. Now, we may make some mistakes along the way, and I'm going to give you a concrete example of how I used truth as an early truth student to illustrate that, because being a new truth student is a real hoot. It's a whole lot of fun. When you get started programming parking places, and maybe at the mall or at an event or something like that, and then you have all the ahas, and so you try something else, and then you try something else, and you get braver and braver and braver, and all those things that you try and test, all these tools as you learn them, bond you permanently with the universal principles of Unity's practical Christianity. And that bonding takes place, and all of a sudden you realize something's changed in your life. And the first time I realized that was when I was walking in the village, in the Rose Garden at Unity Village, and I realized that if my ex-mother-in-law and my ex-husband walked up, I would hug them. I would hug them so tight, and I would say, thank you, thank you, thank you for helping me become the person I am today, that I have so much hope in my life. And I also realized that I had turned a corner when I was going like this, sliding down an embankment backwards in the snow and ice. And I said, divine order. Not some of the four-letter words that maybe people say, and not some of the other things that may come out of their mouths. But being a new truth student is a real hoot, and the fun is in seeing the ahas, and having the ahas, and that bonds you to the truth, and pretty soon you realize you're kind of living it. You really are. I want to take you back to fall of 1973. I was a single parent teaching at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and I was going through a divorce. And I said to my very best friend, told her that I was going through a divorce, and she said to me, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, first thing I'm going to do is find a church home for Melody and I, because that was one of the issues in the marriage. Didn't have a church home, and I'd grown up with one, and I missed that, and that was a real issue. And so she says, come to Unity with me Sunday. Wow. That's a friend. That's a friend. And Unity Village with Jane and Sig Paulson was my first Unity church. And was my Unity church, still is my spiritual home. It's where Les and I have met. It's where we married. It's where my daughter married. It's where many things have happened in my life. But in fall of 73, I was a young truth student. Now, we had studied that book, What Treasure Mapping Can Do for You. You may have studied that. You may have read it, where you sort of diagram out your dreams and your hopes for the foreseeable future, or maybe for a year, maybe for a month, or whatever like this. We had read that and studied that in the singles group, but I thought, I don't think I'll do that. I'd probably mess it up. How's that for a good truth student? So I decided not to do that. I thought, okay, I think I'll create an affirmation. It was getting in the fall of the year, getting close to New Year's, and so I created myself an affirmation. And I decided that's what I would do. I'd leave it open, okay? Open to spirit. Whatever happens. This is the affirmation I chose. 1974 will be the best year of my life. That, I tabbed it. Charles Roth would say, totally accept the belief. That's tabbing something. I seared it into my consciousness. I told everyone in my life that 1971 would be the best year of my life. And accepted it totally. Then 1974 began. And within a month, things began to happen that didn't fit quite. But remember, I had seared that into my consciousness. I had totally accepted that belief. That was my reality. And things started happening. First thing, all kinds of blessings came to me. First one was the tree branches grew through the water line out in my front yard, and the basement filled up with water 1 or 2 feet deep. Well, that had to be straightened out. Big blessings. Big blessings. The second one was that the plumbing, I went down in the basement one day and there was water dripping on the floor, and the plumbing in the wall behind the sink in the bathroom had begun to leak on the bathroom floor. I had never expected that kind of thing. Lots of blessings, folks. The blessings continued, and they continued for months. And I would not have believed it had I not have experienced it. But number 3 was the bathtub. Bathtub became clogged. Now, I was an independent woman, okay? And I'm not asking anybody to do anything for me if I can keep from it. And so I poured chemicals down that bathtub that was clogged, and they didn't work. I plunged those chemicals, they didn't work. I poured more chemicals down that bathtub, and they didn't work. And I plunged them, and they didn't work. And so I did that a third time. I poured chemicals down the bathtub, didn't work. So I thought, okay, now wait, maybe there's a place down in the basement where I can unclog this bathtub. So I went down in the basement, and there's this canister up there. Everybody know what I'm talking about? Some of you know what I'm talking about. If you're a plumber, especially you know what I'm talking about. But there's this canister that things go into down below the bathtub if you have a basement in your house. It would be under the house if you had a crawl space. So I went down there, and it's up too high, so I got a chair. Big mistake, right? So I got a chair, and I went over, and there's this great big screw. You know, that's probably an inch square. This great big, it's not a screw, it's a bolt, isn't it? See, I can't even tell you the right terminology. But at any rate, I got up on the chair, and I thought, okay, I can't get that. It's still too high. So I went and got the big wrench, okay? So I got up on that chair with that great big wrench, and I twisted it, and I twisted it, and I twisted it, still wouldn't move. Okay? So I went and got a hammer, and I thought, okay, if I get that in place and I ding the end of that wrench, big long wrench with the hammer, then maybe it'll help it come loose. So here I am on a chair with this great big wrench and hitting the end of the wrench with a hammer to unscrew the canister thing down below the bathtub, but up above me on the chair in the basement. And it comes loose. And all the chemicals come down on me. Nothing particularly bad happened as a result of that. I showered real quick, washed out my eyes, washed my hair in the whole 9 yards, and we made it through that. And I got the bathtub unstuck, and I also got the canister back up there. How, I'm not sure, but I got it back up there. Remember, this independent lady was not going to ask for help. Not going to ask for help. But every week when I went to singles group, we all talked about our week. And every week I had a disaster. And every week they would say to me, You still think 1974 is going to be the best year of your life? And I said, oh yeah, it's not even half over yet. I never wavered. I never wavered. That's the strength of using an affirmation. I never wavered. And all of the things that happened, and I'm not half through yet, guys. All of the things that happened became like jokes. And they became like watching one of these old movies going by. They didn't affect me because I didn't let them. I had made up my mind, and spirit loves the made-up mind. That it can work with. That it can work with. Now, next thing that happened, blessing number 4. The seat of my bathroom stool broke off on one side. And so the mechanism that holds it together, holds it to the back, on that one side that was busted off, the pot metal can bust. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do now? To ask help for a bathroom seat as an independent woman like me? Wasn't in the plan. So I thought, WD-40. So I got WD-40 and I soaked that baby with WD-40, and I tried to unscrew that screw and it would not budge. It would not budge. So I squirted it again with WD-40 as much as I could. Probably used most of the can. But then I thought, okay, the WD-40 can't get down to the frozen thing. So I thought, okay, I'll take this little screwdriver and I'll hammer the edge of that screwdriver and it'll jar the bolt and the WD-40 can get in there, and then I can undo that. So you think that worked? No, so here I am with the screwdriver and a hammer to jar that to get the WD-40 down in there, and I miss the end of the screwdriver, and I hit the neck where all the water runs from the bowl, from the tank down to the bowl. And I think I'm using some of the right terms, aren't I? Okay. So all the water, every time you flush the stool, then you have to mop the floor. So there I was. That was blessing number 4. Blessing number 5 was I had to find a bathroom stool. I called Sears. I called Penny's. I called everywhere I could that might have bathroom stools, and there was a shortage of bathroom stools. I've never heard of that in my life. I could not believe it. So I contacted my sister and brother-in-law who had a friend that was a plumber. And I told them my plight. And so they called Tom Plumbing in Kansas City. And he said, yeah, that's right. There's a shortage right now of ones that fit in your house. That's right. I said, what am I going to do? Mop the floor every single time I flush the stool. So Tom hunted in some of his outbuildings, and in the attic of one of his outbuildings, plumbers sometimes have outbuildings to keep the product in. Anyway, he found one in the attic of one of his outbuildings and brought it over and put it in. And it worked. So that was blessing number 5. Now, we're only up to about March now, folks. So then the 60 amp fuse box in my little house blew up. Literally blew up. Guess what? They didn't replace 60 amp fuse boxes. They didn't put them back in a house. They put 100 amp fuse boxes in. And so I had to get a 100 amp fuse box. And meanwhile, while I'm waiting for all that to take place, the next door neighbor allowed me to run an extension cord over there, so at least I could keep the stuff in the refrigerator cold and the stuff from the freezer from thawing. So finally then I have a 60 or 100 amp fuse box, and that's all done. And we're just blessed and blessed and blessed. Now, in all of this, I'm thinking, my car has a lot of mileage on it. 66 Ford Fairlane, bright red. It would pass anything on the road. But I thought, I can't afford to be stranded. So when I went down for Easter time, I decided I'd have it checked over by a mechanic at my hometown. So I had it checked by a mechanic in my hometown, and I asked him, I said, will this get me through till spring or beyond? He said, it might get you through next week. It's exactly the words he said. And I said, but it'll pass anything on the road. I don't understand that. And he said, there's almost no compression in that engine. I don't know what that means, but some of you do. Almost no compression in that engine. So I talked to my little car. I'm one of those that I'm one with the car, you know. Inanimate objects are affected by our treatment of them. Don't kid yourself. Be good to the things you enjoy, your washer, your dryer, you know, be good to those things and your car. And so I told the little car, I said, had a talk with it. I said, now don't leave me stranded, whatever you do, and I'll give you a rest right away. So I told my dad I needed a car. He said, well, go over and see whatever his name was, I can't remember it right now, in Nevada, Missouri, because Dad bought a car about every other year from him. The joke in our family was that when the ashtray got full, he traded cars. Because he was a smoker at that time. But at the same time, I went to him and I said, I think I want a Pinto wagon. And he, fatherly, good friend of my own father, said, but tell me how you drive. You got to tell me how you drive first. And I said, well, I move on down the road. If somebody's going 5 miles below the speed limit, I'm going to be around them and on down the road. I'm not going to drive 5 miles below the speed limit. And sometimes I go a little bit over. And so he said, well, I won't sell you a Pinto wagon. Car dealer that wouldn't sell me a new car? I hadn't heard of that either till then. And he said, no. He said, you'll get in trouble. You'll get yourself in trouble if you buy that kind of a car. You need something with more power. And so I looked out there in the sales floor, and there was this gorgeous Gran Torino out there. I don't know if you remember 74 and Gran Torinos. Beautiful cars. And they were loaded, just absolutely loaded, at least mine was. And so I said, well, how much for something like that? And so we talked about that for a little while, and we made an arrangement. And the next day, or the Monday, when I went back to work at the university, I went to the person that was my mentor on the faculty there. He showed me how to join the Teachers Credit Union, how to look up Blue Book costs and all of that kind of stuff. It was very helpful to me. And I showed him my sales slip. He had exactly the same car a year older. And he says, I don't see how he sold you that for that. He couldn't sell you that for that. He said, I have one sitting out there that's a year older than this, and I paid way more than that for mine. And I said, well, maybe it has something to do with the fact that my dad buys a car about every other year from him, and Mother about every 3 years. But that Gran Torino, when I took it home, I took my daughter to school as I did every single day. I took her to school. I came back into the driveway. I wheeled in the driveway, slammed on the brake, except the Gran Torino's about 2 feet longer. It popped right in the middle. The garage door busted all down the front. So I had a new garage door. I had an automobile accident. They puttied and spot painted my new car. You don't do that to this woman. You don't do that to this woman. I complained about that. Within a month, a lady ran a red light in downtown Kansas City and hit me. She ran a red light and hit me. The car was fixed correctly. The last thing that happened, the last blessing, and I bet you're wondering how I'm doing during all of this, it didn't faze me, guys. It did not faze me because I had made up my mind. I had created my reality, that 1974 would be the best year of my life. And the next thing that happened is a windstorm blew my front storm and screen door off, and it was in a heap in the front yard. Now, I got to scoot fast on through all of this, and all these things happened, depleted my resources, and I felt I needed a summer job. My daughter was old enough, I felt, for me to have a summer job, and the singles group sponsors said, try out here at Unity, check in the education department. There I was for the summer. I complained. I want to look closer at this. If you're a new student, you need to listen to this. I had complained about the wall-hung sink. I wanted a vanity. I had wanted air conditioning in my house. A 60-amp fuse box would not do it. I had complained about how my car was fixed, the first automobile accident. Somebody ran a red light. Another automobile accident, and my car was fixed correctly. I had been unhappy about the front screen door wooden swelling in the spring rains, and it wouldn't hook. It wouldn't close completely and hook. Guess what? It ended up in a heap on my front lawn. But all of these things depleted my resources and caused me to feel like I needed a summer job. And I was at Unity Village writing press releases, doing tours, and helping in any way that I could all summer long that summer. And I had the ankle brace on my ankle following the second automobile accident when I was introduced to my husband, Les McClelland. He was there at the first week of a minister's conference, and I was hunting Bob Stevens, who was the minister in San Diego. They needed him. The ministry needed him. I needed to find him at the village. And I was walking around and went into the cafeteria and bumped into the singles sponsor, Conrad Stahl, who later was in ministry in California, Hollywood, California. And I asked him about Bob Stevens. He said he saw him in the Rose Garden a short time ago, but he didn't know where he was then. But he also said, Pat, here's Les. Les, here's Pat. And he said it with that exact inflection, and it's etched in my psyche. I can't believe he did that. Now, a week or so later, we ended up at the same AUC dinner dance, neither one having planned to go. And both of us, through all kinds of quirks, ended up there, seated together by a quirk, and we danced all night. And within 2 months, we were married. And my strong sense was we had a work to do together. And combined, we have 80 years of Unity ministry. I cannot vouch for how much help I've been to people over the years, but I can vouch for Les. Somebody who has traveled the world teaching truth said to me one time that he felt Les was the best one-on-one counselor that he had ever known in Unity. But what is there to learn about all this? What there is to learn is don't complain, first of all. Don't complain. That had been one of the things that was consistent through a lot of this. Everything in my little house was ready to rent or sell by the time Les and I got married. Everything was a blessing. I'm calling it a blessing, and we've kind of made a joke out of that, but it really was. All of that got my house ready to rent or sell, and the next door neighbor's son and his wife bought the house about the time Les and I got married. Create a strong affirmation and marry yourself to that affirmation, but do it wisely. Anybody see something wrong with my affirmation? Can anybody see something wrong with it? Good! It should have been 1974 will be my best year yet. Best year yet. The work I had to do to undo that in my psyche took a lot of work the next 6 months. Because you see, if 1974 was going to be the best year of my life, which is the affirmation I chose, that means all before and all after won't be as good. And you can't live that way. You have to keep going forward. And so that period in my life, I refer to as my spiritual PhD in practical Christianity. Anything can manifest. Hear this. Anything can manifest. Anything did manifest. Anything did. Tree branches, tree roots grew through the water line. A 60-amp fuse box blew up. I mean, think of all this stuff. I would not believe it had I not lived it. And it all happened within 6 months. Within 6 months. Pick an affirmation, vouch for it, sear it into your consciousness for anything and everything that you truly, truly desire. Pray for anything, but always add this or something better, that which is for my highest good and the highest good of all concerned. Then you're not cutting anybody out, and you're not cutting anybody short, even yourself. I learned a lot. Believe me, there's a lot to learn in unity. There's a lot to learn. And there's one last thing I want to do, and I did like Sue always does. I overplanned, so I'm having to lob stuff off here and there and everywhere. But my grandmother's favorite poem was Invictus. A few of you will probably know that poem. I'm not going to read the whole poem, but the last 4 lines mean so much. It's become one of my favorite poems too. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the captain of my fate. No, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And what I want you to do with me is to say those last 2 lines. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Whatever it is that you want to change about your life, get to work and do it. It's possible. It's possible. But I would say, do it wisely. Don't limit yourself or anyone else, because for that you can pay a price. You are able to draw upon all of the 12 powers. The strength is in you for anything you ever want to accomplish. It's there. Not everything, perhaps, but anything. I've tried it. I succeeded, even when I made mistakes. Just keep going. Just keep going in your life. Keep creating in the invisible that which you desire, and it will, and stick with it until it's real, until you see the manifestation. I promise you it will happen. It will happen.